All right, inside the Sixers, Paul Hudrick is here as the Sixers win big last night. But there's so many other questions that come off of that win. And obviously, Paul, one of them is Ben Simmons and how he kind of responded and what he said last night. You guys asked him about the fact that, hey, your name was in these trade rumors. It's kind of hard to tell with the mask on because they said, hey, do you want to be here? And he said, of course. And then he kind of laughed, and you can't see his reaction. But how did you feel that Ben took this whole situation? There's some reports that he was ecstatic. Now, some people thought, well, he would come out with fire and brimstone last night. That didn't really happen, but he did have a triple-double and had a pretty good game, but it was very Ben Simmons that we saw. So now that the dust is kind of settled on this, how do you feel Ben feels about his name being mentioned in trade rumors?
I think it's what I said before. I think he's kind of unaffected. I give him credit because I'm curious if this would have came up last year or the year before, I'm not sure if he would have reacted the way he has. He's given a really good professional answer every time it's been a consistent message every time. Every time he's asked, he says, "Listen, I'm a professional. I'm going to show up. It's a business. I'm going to do everything I can to help this team win while I'm here," and that's it. And I think the of course answer and the chuckle, I think it's because genuinely, I think Ben Simmons really enjoys being a Sixer. I really believe that. I think he enjoys the city. I think he's made a lot of relationships around the team. I think even right now, I think he really is enjoying playing for Doc Rivers. I think he's enjoying learning from Sam Cassell. So I think he is genuinely very happy to be here. But like I said, I'm curious how this would I don't think he would have had the same reaction if this happened a year ago or 2 years ago. I think he's in a different place now. Like you said, Mike, the reaction on the court maybe wasn't what some people would have liked. He didn't exactly come out and, put up, 40 points or something like that, but that's also not Ben Simmons' way. He kind of lets the game come to him, which I understand can aggravate people from time to time, but I thought he was good. I thought it was a pretty decent bounce back performance. I thought defensively he was excellent, guarding Tyler Hero more than guarding, the shooters of like Duncan Robinson. And it's definitely a different thing. And Doc Rivers pointed to that pregame yesterday, but I thought his response was mature, professional. And I think on the court, I think he didn't overdo it. I think he played his game.
Paul, you look at somebody brought up yesterday on our show that, hey, Dennis Rodman was a Hall of Famer. He didn't score a lot of points. Do we need to just change our expectations of Ben? Like, we were told he was this transformational, generational player, and that got our expectations so high. And because he didn't meet that, we now want to get rid of him. But isn't it better to just change your expectations and still consider him a very useful and great player?
Mike, I swear, if I haven't been saying that for the last 3 years since I've been covering the guy, yeah, I think that's it. I'm reminded of two things, and both of them are from former NBA coaches I've talked to. One was Larry Brown, and he said too many people focus on what guys can't do instead of focusing on what they can do. So there's that. And you bring up Dennis Rodman, and there's another name from that Bulls team that I think is even closer, and that's Scottie Pippen, and that's who Coach Jim Lynam, when I talked to him, compared him to. And if you look at, the numbers of Scottie Pippen and Ben Simmons, and especially early in – because, listen, yeah, Pippen developed as a scorer as his career went on, but when he first got to the Bulls, he was really similar to Ben Simmons. He was a point forward type player who played great defense, who was disruptive and got steals, and that's the kind of player he was early on. So, to me, I think that's a great way to look at it, Mike, is let's not focus. I get it. It can be frustrating at times because you want him to be that transcendent guy. You want him to be that LeBron James or that, whomever you want to name. But there's only so many of those guys that exist. So it's possible that Ben Simmons could be a great player, but maybe not be that guy that maybe some people want him to be. But that doesn't mean he can't have a great career next to Joel Embiid.
So just to push back a little bit on the other side, not that I'm disagreeing with any of what you guys say, but focusing on what they can't do. Well, it seems that one thing that he can't do hurts the spacing so much in half-court sets when the basketball games get so much more meaningful. So I'll ask you this question. I know it's hard to know. It's all speculation. With the spacing of Seth Curry, Danny Green, Tobias Harris playing this way, do you think Ben's game of finding these wide-open guys can actually work based off of having three-point shooters in half-court sets in postseason play?
it's so early to know because we're so early into the season and they've had so many disruptions. But I'll say two things. One, it was trending towards that path before COVID kind of ravaged the team with Seth Curry and all that. I mean, it certainly looked like that was going to be the case. Offensively, they weren't struggling. I mean, they were in pretty good shape, and their defense was at the top of the league. So when I look at it like that, they were trending in a good direction. And I'll say this too, Bros, it doesn't hurt to do that. Daryl Morey, what he keeps prefacing is that playoff run when it was, the first time Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid were together, and you had all those shooters surrounding them, and you're seeing a similar roster. I would argue a better one as far as of level of players. And then add to that the way Tobias Harris. Look, I was really curious to see how Tobias Harris would look after his time off because he looked so good before that. And he didn't miss a beat last night. He looked great. I mean, granted, I know Miami is depleted and they don't have the players that they should have, but I still thought he was, decisive, aggressive, and it's like this balance he has found where he lets the game come to him, but he's still taking his opportunities when it does. So I think we're not gonna know for sure until we see it, but it certainly it looks good. And then I would say too, to add to that, this isn't the roster we're going to see, I believe, when the playoffs hit, whether that's a big move or whether that's some couple moves around the margins to just make the team better. This isn't the team that the Sixers are going to look like after the trade deadline and heading into the playoffs. So I'm encouraged, and I want to see it play out more. But like I said, you saw hints that it could work. So hopefully when they're at full strength and Seth Curry's back, it continues to progress.
Paul Hudrick. Now, were you there last night? I know you were there Tuesday. Were you there last night?
No, so it was Kevin last night. Kevin McCormick.
Kevin was there last night. So you were there Tuesday night. Being in the building, is there a different energy in terms of like the game? Like, does it feel like the players are playing at a different level, or is that not noticeable with no fans there?
I don't know about the players because the game still feels, I mean, especially for, because the media's perspective, just to give you guys an idea, normally we're behind the basket and, amongst the crowd, we're behind the basket. Now with everything going on, we're basically on a half court, like on the sidelines. So our perspective is different. And quite frankly, I'll be honest, it's better to see the game. You see the game more and you kind of get more of appreciation for the speed and all that and the flow of the game. So I don't know if it's necessarily affecting the players, but the building just definitely feels different. It's funny because, Bruce, you mentioned about Tyrese Maxey and how much he would have been loved. The two loudest I've ever heard, the two moments I've ever heard the Wells Fargo Center the loudest. The Game 5 against Miami when Meek Mill rang the bell. But number two was when Markelle Fultz hit a three in the home opener against the Bulls. Like, I'm dead serious. So I could imagine, like, Saturday, if that arena was packed, with only 7 players available and Tyrese Maxey was dropping 39, I imagine that crowd would have lost it. It would have been a fever pitch. So I'm not sure it's affected the players, but you could definitely feel the energy in the arena. It's so different right now.
I want to get your take on. I think it was you, Paul, who asked about the depth of this team last night and where Doc Rivers goes with this team with these last couple of games. Having to use extra guys, has anyone entered the mix? And how, he kind of said, okay, I'll play 13, 14, 15 guys if I have to. We know that's not realistic. So where do we see this team's rotation kind of formulating once they get back to full strength, which is happening here pretty soon, once they get Curry back?
Yeah, and Korkmaz as well. And it's an interesting dynamic because the reason I asked that question is that Doc was kind of coy about it when we asked him about it during training camp. And Brett Brown was always very transparent. He wanted like 10 guys for the regular season, and then once it got to the playoffs, it was 8 or 9. So it was interesting to hear Doc basically say, no, like if guys are playing well, I'll play whoever's playing well. So I find that very interesting because a lot of times coaches want to shorten that rotation so that guys can have roles and can play a certain amount of minutes and kind of fit in. But it's an interesting approach from Doc Rivers. I don't think it's right or wrong. I think it's just up to the coach and how they feel and how comfortable they feel. But I think, Tyrese Maxey, first of all, has to be a part of it. Like, no doubt. He's got to be a pretty decent part of it. Because I think he's shown, in the starting lineup last night, it was, him and 4 other starters, and he did not look out of place remotely. He looked like he fit right in. So I think he's got to have a spot. I've been blown away by Isaiah Joe. I mean, I think it's blown away relative to what his circumstances are as a second-round pick and a rookie, a 21-year-old, to step into the role the way he has, shooting over 40% from three on a healthy amount of attempts over his last 4 games and not lost defensively. Doc Rivers bloated his defense pregame last night when I asked him about it. And so I think, it's, and as Doc said postgame, it's a good problem to have. When you have an issue where you might have too many good players and not enough rotation spots, that's certainly a great problem to have. And I'm curious what it's going to look like as we get closer to the trade deadline in March. And as you mentioned, Mike, when you get Seth Curry back, when you get Furkan Korkmaz back, how is this all going to look at full strength? And it is a very good problem for the Sixers to have.
And that certainly will be a more intriguing watch as well. I mean, it's fun seeing Isaiah Joe. I think they found something there. It's fun seeing some of these guys get some minutes, but you definitely want to see how this roster, and I think that changes our view of Ben Simmons. Having Curry and Green and shooters will change your thought process on what you see from Ben Simmons, and that is something that will evolve over the course of this season. I think he did shoot a 3 last night.
Ben did. Yes, he did. Corner 3.
Did it go in?
No, it did not.
Nope, because I bet it on DraftKings. Paul Hudrick is our Sixers insider for 97.3 ESPN.com. He's at Paul Hudrick on Twitter. His Coming In for a Landing podcast. You can listen to the latest edition. Came out last night. Check that out as well. And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline